Hi everyone, welcome to Therapy from Inside Out. My name is Azadeh, and today we are going to discuss ADHD in kids and in teens. And I have a very good colleague of mine. His name is Anthony, and he has a private practice here in Pasadena, and he is going to educate us when it comes to this diagnosis, especially now that we are facing this pandemic that is so hard on all of us. We really need to have all the tools necessary to be able to fight this and also come together and help each other, because as a parent who is struggling with a child with this diagnosis, is not easy. We're here for you. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. I hope you enjoyed this interview as much as I did. Welcome everyone. Today we have an amazing therapist with us. His name is Anthony, and he is going to educate us when it comes to ADHD, especially now that we are dealing with COVID-19 and this pandemic. We need all the help necessary, all the tools necessary to be able to help ourselves and help our kids or whomever that is battling with ADHD. So thank you so much for taking the time and being here with me. Please tell us a little bit about yourself, Anthony.
Thanks so much, Azadeh. I appreciate that. As you said, my name is Anthony Gershenson, and I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist, and I practice in the Pasadena area. My company is called Insight Personal and Family Therapy, Inc., and I co-own it with another brilliant clinician, Dr. Farnoosh Farmand, who is a licensed clinical psychologist, who also happens to be my wife. And so for the past 10 years or so, I've been working with adults, adolescents, and children, primarily those struggling with anxiety and ADHD. And I think the main reason I was drawn to working with this population is because ADHD is something that I personally struggle with and have been diagnosed with and been managing for quite some time. And so I think that I'm in a unique position to connect with the challenges that they struggle with.
Wow, I did not know that. That's news to me. So tell me, what are the, tell us a little bit about, I'm new to this topic. I know a little bit, obviously, going from school and learning about this. How many people right now are struggling with ADHD currently in America?
It's a very good question, and a lot of people don't necessarily know the facts about it, so I'm glad that you asked. And since there's a couple statistics, it's hard to keep in my head. I'm just going to read it off a little bit. So right now, ADHD is one of the most common neurodevelopmental disorders that can affect children, especially in America. The CDC currently estimates that between 9.4 to 11% of children ages 2 to 17 are diagnosed with the disorder. That's about 6.1 million US children. So it's very prevalent. And it continues to be predominantly diagnosed in boys versus girls at a ratio about 3 to 1. And though it's been interesting lately, it mostly gets diagnosed and seen in boys, though in the past few years, there's been a major upsurge in diagnosis in young women. Unfortunately, at least 1 in 5 students with ADHD don't receive the necessary intervention services in school to be able to help support their extra needs, because it is in a lot of ways a learning disability. About a third of children diagnosed with ADHD carry on the disorder into adulthood, and there is a big hereditary component to it. About 50% of children diagnosed with ADHD have at least one parent who also has the disorder.
Wow. And I did not know that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and one of the unfortunate added challenges to it, and maybe parents who are struggling with kids who have ADHD will attest to this, that it's about 5 times more expensive to raise a child with ADHD than without, just because of the extra tools and support that they need, just to be able to kind of function and compete with kids, with their peers, the same age.
So that's a lot of money. Having kids itself, it's so expensive.
and on top of it, adding all these tools that they need to be able to function and to be able to compete in a classroom. So now that we are struggling with this pandemic and kids haven't been able to go back to school and have the routines, how is this affecting them, and how are they getting these tools?
Well, I'm glad that you asked. As I said, I work with a lot of kids and adults who have ADHD. So right now I'm getting a lot of feedback from parents who are really struggling, especially even if their kids don't have ADHD, they're struggling with helping them to learn, to be able to create structure, to be able to have some semblance of normalcy right now, because life as we know it is kind of on its head. And so everyone's just kind of scrambling to keep up. So it's difficult. It really is for a lot of parents. And I think the thing that I notice the most is that parents often struggle with the idea of what they can expect from their child with ADHD, especially in the setting at home when they don't have school and they don't have regular classes and regular interaction with other kids. It can be incredibly trying on them. And so they have to adapt. And so a lot of what I want to talk about today are ways that parents can do just that.
Okay, so before we go into some tools that you can kind of provide us and provide the audience who are struggling with this, what are the symptoms? So let's see, we have people who have the diagnosis. Mm-hmm. How about the people that are the parents who are kind of iffy? They don't know whether or not they are having a child who is diagnosed with this, or who needs these special what do you call it, special care or special tools. What should they look for? What are the signs that they can look for?
Definitely. Well, so I'm always surprised and shocked, frankly, that there is so little education of parents when their child is diagnosed with ADHD as to what to expect, what the regular symptoms look like. Parents mm-hmm. usually just come in knowing that there's some kind of a problem, mm-hmm. and they get this diagnosis and they're kind of sent on their way to go deal with it, but they're recommended medication or therapy, but the parents need a lot of support and a lot of understanding of what exactly is going on. So to kind of break it down, ADHD is diagnosed there are three main types. Mm-hmm. The first is the inattentive type. And this one gets overlooked the most by parents and is the hardest to detect, primarily because there's not as many significant acting out behaviors that they can observe. And so it can often fly under the radar as laziness or a lack of motivation. So some of the symptoms that go along with the inattentive type are just as it sounds: inattention, a pattern of distractibility, often kids who are daydreaming when they're tasked with something boring, or when they're in the classroom or something doesn't necessarily grab their attention right away. They tend to be very forgetful, often misplacing things and losing items, often important things, walking into a room, setting something down and having no idea where they put it. There's difficulty with planning and organizing. That's a really big one, and that kind of affects a lot of different things. Activities that have a lot of multiple steps to them are very, very challenging and easily frustrate kids with the inattentive type. Difficult attending to details. They make frequent and careless errors on things, on certain assignments, usually due to rushing into things and not reading the directions fully. They often avoid activities that are boring or repetitious and that require sustained mental effort, because the sheer amount of energy it takes to focus on something when you have ADHD is far more taxing than it is with a child who does not have it. And one of the biggest problems with it is there's an inherent lack of follow through on goals and obligations, things that they need to do, but don't necessarily know how, don't know how to deal with the steps, or they just run out of gas and just don't have the energy to follow through on it. The hyperactive type, the next type, is the easiest to detect. It's very visible. These kids are extremely active, have very low impulse control, meaning they tend to just do things that come to them, that entertain them. They could be blurting out, things out of nowhere, singing a song as loud as they possibly can because it entertains them because they're bored. In class, they're often disruptive, blurting out answers or interrupting people or, talking to their neighbors, things like that. They have a hard time sitting still, just constantly want to move and can't really, they're just kind of crawling out of their skin if they're kept in a place for too long, unless they're focused on something they really, really enjoy.
Ooh, I'm going to interrupt you. When you say that, I'm thinking, gosh, the parents who are struggling, having a child right now at home who is constantly, they have to internate, that must be very challenging for them right now.
Extremely, because obviously the access to the outside world is limited, and their ability to engage not only with their peers, but just in physical activities is extremely limited. So there has to be some, fair amount of adaptation. And, unfortunately, it falls on the parents to have to bring a lot of their own energy to kind of keeping pace with their child. And that's in addition to if the fact that they have any other children, or if they work from home and have to maintain their own job. So it can be a really tall order for parents to be able to have to juggle these different aspects of their life, especially with somebody who has a child with ADHD.
So do you see, in your practice right now, have you seen an increase in parents reaching out to you, wanting help and don't know where to turn for help?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So parents, for a while had the luxury that their child for 7-8 hours a day goes to school, and that there's a structure provided there, and there are classes and somebody else to kind of help corral their child and keep them, focused and on task. And now that kids are at home 24 hours a day, spending time with their parents, now that job falls to parents to have to do that. And so they are asking for a lot of different ways to be able to help find an outlet for their kids for all that physical energy, how to help keep them interested and focused on learning when it's on a screen in front of them and they're not engaging with another person when they're learning something. It makes it extremely difficult. And so parents are kind of pulling their hair out just out of ideas, and the frustration builds and they get impatient, understandably so. And so parents tend to lose their cool, lose their temper, and end up getting frustrated. And they're calling me saying, I ended up yelling at my child or losing my patience, and they're disappointed in themselves because they know that they don't want to necessarily be doing this, but they feel like they're out of options. And so it's my great pleasure, if I can, to be able to help them to find some solutions that there can be some more harmony at home.
Well, that's wonderful that you can kind of give them first of all, the outlet for them to vent and know that they have a support system, and also maybe get them the tools that they need. And I understand in therapy, when we talk about tools and helping is so customized to their circumstances, to what their struggles are. Do you think you can give us that overall a broad, how would I say it? Maybe some broad tools that parents can use, maybe a few of them that you can mention that that could work now that they are home and they don't have the luxury, like you mentioned, and having to send the kids to school?
Absolutely. Be happy to. So I'd say the single biggest thing, and you had mentioned it earlier, is creating structure. The structure that's lost by school and regular activities and appointments and all that kind of stuff. That's all lost now. So it needs to be created in order to help kids to stay focused. Kids, particularly those struggling with ADHD, lack the ability to create structure themselves. And so therefore, they really need a very firm structure in their daily life that they can follow in order to succeed. They need to know what the expectations are, the rhythms of the day. Very, very important. So for parents to be able to create that structure for them is essential. And some ways to do this are to kind of build the structure around certain kind of certain keystones throughout the day. Meals is a really great way to break it up. And so, for example, if you had a routine pre-quarantine of, we had breakfast at 8 a.m. and lunch at noon and dinner at 6, absolutely keep those meal schedules because they break up the day really nicely. And so they also help to build a child's inner awareness of how much time they have to work with for different activities. Keeping bedtimes and wake-up times consistent day after day, whether it's the weekend or whether it's a weekday, in order to build that sleep hygiene. Making sure that there's a balance between the activities that they have to do for school, their assignments, or doing online classes, and making sure there's plenty of time for play or exercise to kind of break it up. Time to socialize, and we'll get to that in a little bit. And time for them to do creative hobbies and things that don't necessarily involve a screen, seeing as kids are spending a lot of their time looking at a screen, whether it's for entertainment purposes or for learning now. And so if you have an older child with ADHD, like a teenager, I highly recommend as a parent that you sit down with them and you help to create this structure with them. You include them in the process to help them build that autonomy. Kids with ADHD are far less likely to resist a regimen or a structure that they agreed to, that they help to build with you. Obviously, if they're younger, that's not necessarily something that you can do with your young child, so it kind of falls on the parent to do that. But breaking it up as often as possible, long tasks, things that they might find boring, but also making sure that you keep them honest and consistent with it. That includes chores, things they may not necessarily want to do, are just as important, so that the way they know, they're at home, they're not at school, but they're not on vacation. So that definitely helps, just as a broad framework for things.
That's great. These are great tools that you're mentioning, and I feel like, honestly, with anything, consistency and a balance is the key. And now that you mentioned, if you have a younger child, so you need to be more proactive and take charge. And if you have a teenager, then maybe get them involved and create that routine for them. And I've realized this, that even though I'm not struggling with ADHD, it's so important to right now, because we mourning our old routines that keep this new framework of routine and really go step by step to enforce it. Obviously, it's hard. It's the new normal, but I think you touched on it, and it's so important for us that is not struggling with ADHD to have it, but more important, very crucial seems like it for them that are struggling, to be able to kind of hammer it down and be consistent with it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And things that can help to support creating that structure on top of that are thinking of these things ahead of time. Mm-hmm. It's far too difficult when you're in the moment trying to come up with an activity for your child to do when they're bouncing off the walls, or they're bored to tears, and you're racking your brain trying to come up with something. So having a toolkit of different ideas that you've thought of ahead of time to kind of bring to the table is essential. So take some time before you kind of enact a structure, and discuss the structure with your child. Kids with ADHD, they oftentimes have a hard time listening, especially if something that they find boring. So going over a daily schedule will probably sound very boring to them. So when you discuss it with them, make sure that you have them repeat back to you what what your schedule looks like. What do we do first? What do we do second? And have them tell you, so that way they encode it and they remember it far better. So that way you can increase your expectations of them to follow it. Otherwise, it might be very difficult for them.
So as a parent, I would say what I'm hearing is that don't preach to them. Create a collaborative space that you can bounce back and forth and get them involved. Because once you start preaching or lecturing, you are not
They
going
shut
to
down.
have an audience that listen. They just be like, okay, whatever.
They're already off thinking about something else, even if they're staring straight at you.
Oh.
So getting them to kind of talk to you and to engage with you, so that way you know that they understand. Maybe have them say it in their own words or whatever. Something like that would be really helpful.
That's a very good tip.
So with that, when you have kids who need a lot of activity, or need a lot of stimulation throughout the day when they're not doing work, it falls to parents to be their playmate right now, to engage with them. And so it might require parents to think outside the box, or to bring in some new tools, buy a few new board games, buy some new Lego sets, buy more cooking materials, get them into cooking with you, some things that are physically interactive and things that help to develop their brain, their problem solving, their spatial awareness skills, things like that. And as a parent, you're going to have to get down and dirty with them. You're going to have to play with them. And the more excited you are about the activity, even if you think it is super childish and is not up your alley at all, if you get jazzed about it, they're going to get excited about it too, because you're the adult. And if you're really into this thing, well, if adults are into this, then clearly it's something worthwhile. So kids get into it too. So they will match your energy. And that can be really exhausting for parents to have to, engage in play. You don't have to do it every time or all the time, but if you can do it consistently a couple times a day, it would go a long way towards helping them to be able to get out that extra energy. And then there's a lot less anger and frustration and acting out from just that built up, pent up energy that they have. And, frustration from just being forced to focus on something that feels boring to them for long periods of time. And they're sitting there looking at the outside world, just seeing the sunshine and just daydreaming about the fact that they used to be able to do that. And it's hard.
Mm-hmm.
It really is.
Yeah, it is. Now that you were discussing this, that they need to get down and dirty and really be excited about this. I just come up with this, and I don't know if you ever done this, or if you even think that's a great tool, but I wanted to share this with the parents, that if you feel like the days are so long that you have to kind of deal with the homework, also get them excited about activities and do some bonding with them. Maybe what you can do, one of the tools, is to maybe delegate this homework to a family member that can help you through Skype or through FaceTime, maybe twice a week, and they can help you kind of, so you get a break as a parent, because it's also important that you don't burn yourself out and you have that me time to be able to provide your child with the best of you. What do you think about that, Anthony?
Absolutely, Azadeh. I completely agree with you. And you bring up a good point, something I was going to speak to, which is recruit help, get support as best as possible. Like you said, if you can bring in a family member who's older, who can help them to study or to work through things, fantastic. If you don't have somebody like that in your family, that right now, particularly I've noticed this with my high school clients who have ADHD, that they're struggling with, the workload or things that they don't understand and need special help with in school. And so there's a lot of online tutors that they can use and that they can find through various websites. Right now, a lot of college students are finishing up their semester at home on a computer, and they're more than willing for just a few bucks an hour to be able to tutor your child and help them to focus on certain things. So it's a really great resource. There's a couple of different tutoring websites that I looked up. varsitytutors.com seemed like a really reputable one, as well as Wyzant, WYZANT.com.
I've used that one. That's a good one.
Oh,
Yes.
yeah. So places like that where you can be able to find additional support, because interestingly, I've heard this from a lot of adolescents that I work with, that the schools are really ramping up the workload right now, seeing as they're learning from home. They're getting almost twice as much assignments to do from home as they would normally be, probably to make up for the fact that there's just not as much lecturing, teaching going on in the classroom. And so kids are getting swamped and don't know how to handle all this stuff. And so somebody with ADHD has a particularly big problem with handling a lot of things at once. Like we talked about, things that require multiple steps, and can easily get overwhelmed and shut down and avoid and procrastinate things. So the extra support is huge. And for parents, if your kid is one of these who has an excessive amount of work and doesn't really know how to do it, help them to come up with a plan to break it up into chunks. So that way they're not rushing to procrastinate and get everything done at the last minute, but they can do little bits at the end of each day. And one of the most important things to do with that, whether it's your child is a teenager or a small kid, is to provide feedback immediately, positive feedback, positive reinforcement, saying, I love that you got that done. I really appreciate that you're studying. Things like that. All methods of encouragement are really helpful, because in order for somebody with ADHD who gets very bored with things that they don't find interesting to maintain that effort, there needs to be frequent and immediate encouragement after or during an activity that they're doing in order to sustain that motivation throughout. Otherwise, it's far too easy for them to lose interest, get bored with it, get frustrated. But if someone's there saying, you got this, keep going, they're far more likely to follow through.
That's a great advice. I never thought that kids or teens that are struggling with ADHD need that reinforcement constantly. And I'm glad that you brought it up for parents who are in the boat that they are right now, struggling to kind of find new tools and maybe reach out for help, that you are providing that for them. So yeah, it's amazing. And honestly, my heart goes to the parents as well, because it must be such a struggle to be able to kind of deal with whatever going on in your own life, in your personal life, and then have a child who is struggling and you don't have the resources that you used to have anymore. Anthony, are there any websites or any probably websites that they can go to or find information, get help? I mean, I know you are available. Are you taking new clients?
Yes, I am currently taking on new clients. And for more information, obviously they can go to my website, insightforlife.net. The 4 is a number, Insight for Life. And there are plenty of other resources available on my website. There's more information, but websites dedicated exclusively to ADHD, such as Attitude, ADDITUDE.com, I believe it is very helpful, and they're kind of, that's their bread and butter, and they always have really good information on it. Childmind.org is another really useful tool to learn a variety of different things about the way that kids' minds work and how to be able to help them and understand them better. And so, yeah, there's a lot of resources available. Parents just need to know kind of where to look to find that sort of thing. But yeah, if they want, hands-on work, I'm more than happy to work with them if they're looking for support.
Yeah, and I mean, you're great, so I'm sure they're going to be in great hands. But before we wrap up, I want you to maybe pinpoint if parents who are on their um, on the edge, not knowing whether or not they have a child who are struggling with ADHD, what would be one or two signs that is very prominent in kids or teens that they can see, okay, I see that within my child, and maybe I should learn more about it.
So kind of going back to some of the symptoms we talked about earlier, there, the biggest thing to look for is patterns of behavior. You know, any child can demonstrate inattention or hyperactivity or difficulty controlling impulses from time to time. But those with ADHD do it consistently, repeatedly, in the same kind of situations. And they do it despite the fact that as a parent, you might impose consequences for that sort of behavior. They do it anyway, and it's often not to spite you as a parent, but because they lack the impulse control or the ability to kind of be aware of their behaviors in order to prevent them from doing them, even though they know there are consequences attached to them.
Mm.
Um,
That's
there,
exactly, and that's exactly what I was thinking, that would differentiate between a child who is struggling and differentiate between a child who is not struggling. Is so they should look for pattern. If it's happening more often than not, then maybe they should question themselves whether or not they should seek help or start looking into more information that is
right.
available out there.
Yes, absolutely. And there were two more things I wanted to kind of briefly touch on, if possible, that I think might be really useful to parents. One is regarding screen time, which is a really big deal. You know, for every kid right now that is glued to a screen of some kind, whether it's their phone, the TV, a computer, video game, something like that. The conventional wisdom has been for a while is to really restrict and limit screen time for a lot of kids, especially those with ADHD, because of the stimulation and kind of the addictive factor to it. With what's going on right now with COVID-19, kids do not have their regular normal outlets for socialization with other kids. They can't see them, they can't interact with them. So, but through digital means is one of the best ways that they can, and only ways that they can connect with their friends, whether it's, you know, through social media or texting or online gaming or things like that. So I encourage parents to be a little bit more flexible with screen time and understanding that that's a big part of their socialization. Even if it comes to video games, a couple hours of video games a day, especially if it's social, so that way they can interact with their friends, is not going to scramble your child's brain or ruin them forever, so don't worry. But you do want to set limits with it if it becomes a behavior that when you ask them to stop, they don't stop. You need to be able to set guidelines as to how long they can play. If they really can't pull themselves away, set a timer on your phone or something like that and make sure that they can hear it. And obviously, kind of like we discussed with expectations, you want to discuss that rule and make sure that they understand it and they repeat it back to you ahead of time so they know what the expectation is. And just the final thing I want to mention is to parents about, you had mentioned burnout. The rate of burnout in parents with kids who have ADHD is higher than most. And that obviously is because they require a lot of time and effort and energy and frustration that goes into helping their child. So my philosophy is think of yourself like an engine, like a car engine. You have to take good care of your engine if you want it to run properly. You can't just expect to be jamming on the gas all day, every day, and not have your car break down. You got to make sure, take it in for oil change, things like that. You know, you understand the metaphor. But so how that looks in parents is making sure that first and foremost, you take care of your body. Eat healthy if you can. Make sure you get consistent exercise, whether it's walks or working out at home or things like that. Make sure that you get regular sleep, consistent sleep as much as possible. That one's really big. And also make sure you take time to prioritize yourself. A lot of your day, a lot of your time is dedicated towards looking after your kids and making sure that they're safe and that they're okay. But that time is all dedicated to another person and not necessarily to you. And so that you don't feel like you're living your entire life as a thankless job to help your kid who is constantly struggling, make sure that you pencil in time for yourself, whether it's getting up extra early to go just have to read a book and have a quiet cup of coffee, or do some meditation or yoga, or spend some extra time with your spouse if you can. I understand these things can be challenging with confined spaces and limited amount of places you can go to have a moment to yourself. But if you can get creative with it, you won't regret it, because your patience will last a lot longer. Your energy levels, as we talked about, you have to engage a lot with your kids physically, emotionally, mentally. You will have a much greater capacity for that if you can extend your patience, extend your energy, make sure that you're taking good care of yourself. And parents, you need to socialize as well. Just last week, my parents told me that they did a Zoom cocktail party with a bunch of their friends from different houses. Yeah, that generation is getting involved in it too.
That's wonderful.
And yeah, and they said it was fantastic, and they were able to, enjoy themselves and talk with other adults and be able to socialize with them. So it's not just working with their kids all day. So essential. So please do take good care of yourselves, and you'll be far more equipped to help your kids.
That's wonderful. These are great advice and tips and tools that you have provided for parents. And yes, parents really need to take care of themselves, because they're giving so much out of themselves and their time and their mental health to kind of help their kids. So I'm glad that you're mentioning that they should not forget about themselves. And I love the engine example that you mentioned. That's something I always in therapy use as well. I'm like, are you going to be able to drive your car without a gas? The answer is no. Then you're not going to be able to do anything if you don't have the energy to be able to have a successful day. So Anthony, thank you so much. I really appreciate for you to take this time to kind of providing us with tools and educate us in what to look for and how to deal with kids and teens that are struggling with ADHD. Before we go, is there anything that you want to add? Maybe you can also, again, remind them, our viewers, where they can find you and your services, or anything else that you would like to add.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for the opportunity to speak. I always enjoy sharing this knowledge with parents and those who are needing it. Again, my name is Anthony Gershenson, and I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. You can learn more information about ADHD, about my services, about my colleagues' services at insightforlife.net. The 4 is a number. And there are other online resources as well, but hopefully if you need the additional support, you reach out, email me, call me. I'm happy to even chat for a minute if you're just really needing a short piece of advice. I feel like, no matter what, parents need support, because I know what it's like to, struggle with this, and their children are having a hard time, and they would really benefit from understanding parents who just are compassionate and have the tools and understanding to be able to support them. And it just brings much more harmony to the home. And I think that's what we all need right now.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much. And thank you all for watching. And if you have any questions, comments, don't hesitate to reach out. And me, myself, and Anthony would be more than happy to answer. Or if we don't know, we at least can direct you to where you can get the support that you need. I would like to wish everyone to be kind and be safe.